I work with many relatively early stage apps that are just starting out with their mobile user acquisition activity. And a common question that comes up is, when should I sign up with an MMP? And as an early stage startup, your most scarce resources are developer time and money. And typically the unspoken question that I get asked is, when is it worthwhile to part with developer time and money to integrate an MMP? So the short answer is you do not need an MMP when you are starting out with your user acquisition activity and you're just testing the waters. You can, and I think you should absolutely run your user acquisition activity without an MMP in your early stages of growth. It's only when you're scaling and doing so on multiple channels outside of Google and Facebook that you do need an MMP. Here's why. If you're running UA on just Facebook, you can use the Facebook SDK to set up your event tracking. This is via scan on iOS and via deterministic ADID tracking on Android. This is typically the lowest lift way to set up tracking. If you're running UA on Google UAC, you can use Firebase and Google conversion tracking to do both tracking and optimization. And this can be done both on iOS and Android. And, this is really not a problem because scan reporting on UAC is crap. You have to rely on Google conversion tracking. You have to rely on Firebase anyway, even after you have an MMP in place. So this setup is really no different from what you would have once you're scaling, right? We've shared actually more details on how UAC works with scan, which is basically it doesn't work with scan, right? We've shared more details in our episode of the mobile user acquisition show called The State of Google Ads UAC Post ATT iOS 14.5, 8 Big Changes and Challenges. So that is the state of Google Ads UAC post ATT iOS 14.5, 8 Big Changes and Challenges. Now that episode was recorded in May 2021, but the fact that we still need to rely on Firebase rather than on scan for UAC is still true as of early 2023. So typically, also the additional consideration is that when you're starting out, we do not recommend starting with UAC at all, even if you have Firebase in place, even if you are using Firebase for tracking and attribution. We recommend starting with Facebook only. This is just because the UAC algorithm typically needs significant budgets and conversion volumes to be effective. Again, if you want to find out more, check out the episode of the Mobile UA show called Why We Do Not Run Google UAC on Smaller Mobile User Acquisition Budgets, right? Google for it and check out more details, but really, we do not recommend doing UAC in early stages. Obviously, if you do go down that path, the only disadvantage of tracking via Facebook SDK for Facebook and Firebase for Google is that these are self-attributing channels, and you won't have an apples to apples comparison between these two channels. But, deterministic last click apples to apples comparison between channels has been on its way out, and ATT and scan have only accelerated that process. So you're not going to lose much if you use the Facebook SDK and Google Firebase. As I've said, your most scarce resources are developer time and money, and it's typically not worthwhile for an early stage startup to invest these into integrating an MMP unless you do know you're ready to scale. When do you actually need an MMP? Right, and that's an important question too, because there is a time and place for MMPs. You absolutely do need an MMP if you want to run UA on channels outside of Google and Facebook. If you want to expand to TikTok, Snap, or ad networks, this is a technical requirement to have an MMP in place. You cannot run these channels at all. You need an MMP to set up conversion schemas for iOS and event tracking for Android, and to measure your performance for all of your channels based on last click attribution, right? But until you get to a place where you're ready to scale beyond Facebook and Google UAC, it's almost always enough if you use the Facebook SDK and Firebase for your tracking, attribution, and optimization. I hope this was helpful. If this resonated, please leave a comment, please hit like, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and definitely check out our podcast, The Mobile User Acquisition Show. Thank you.